how you like it, yeah.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Own TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I'm your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. If you didn't see my message, this is going up on Thursday because I ran into an unfortunate random technical issue which threw the whole thing off. So this is why it's going up on Thursday, but next episode will go back on Tuesday. It was just an unforeseen circumstance that popped up. So like I said last week, we are talking about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the TV show that just came out. The premise on IMDb states two strangers land jobs with a spy agency that offers them a life of espionage, wealth, and travel. The catch, the new identities are in an arranged marriage. I think that's pretty solid for what the show is. I would probably rewrite it a little bit just to be a little more clear on what the show is. I mean, it's clear with what the show is, but just like, because I've already watched it, I would just maybe put something different, but hey, that's just me. Before we even get into the episode, I was actually a little hesitant on even watching this show back when it was like kind of first announced and the trailers came out and everything. I love Donald Glover. He's one of my favorite celebrities, if not my favorite celebrity, but there's something about the way that the show looked and the fact that it was like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I was like, I mean, it's not like something I feel like I need to watch. Like, I want to check it out, but mainly I want to check it out because of Donald Glover and not because of like the show itself. So, you know, I decided to give it a chance anyways, but honestly, I was already coming in being like, we'll see what this show has to offer. If this is your first time here, I go through the plot beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. We started with Alexander Skarsgård and Isa Gonzalez, just two very good-looking celebrities. And right off the bat, in my mind, I was like, oh, these are clearly stand-ins for Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, kind of like a metaphorical, referential, like passing of the torch. And we'll get to that, but it's just two of them. They're just kind of chilling on the porch. We start to hear beeping behind them, and a car starts to drive down the driveway, and they're like, oh, like things are about to pop off. So they go in the house, they start grabbing the guns. He's like, yo, we got to get out of here. She's like, I don't want to run away anymore. Like, let's stand and fight. And he's like, all right, let's do it. So they load up their weapons. They get into their spot, and John gets shot. She calls him John. John gets shot right through the face, and he's down. They start, whoever these people are, start shooting up the house. She waits for her moment. She comes out shooting. She's blasting. She walks up to the car, grabs another gun, keeps blasting away. She's just kind of hitting the door. She's not like hitting the person, and she gets sniped and killed. And again, this is where I felt like, okay, you're clearly like, hey, this isn't the movie. I know everyone knows the movie, so like, let's just say it right here, which is why I think they had two celebrities that kind of look like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, and kind of had them start off the show and then kill them off in a way to show the audience like, hey, this isn't what you think it is anymore. Like, that's already done. We're literally and metaphorically killing it. I feel like this part didn't need to be here, simply because I feel like making it self-referential is only like taking a little jab at what was before, as opposed to just letting this new thing be the new thing, if that makes sense. Like, I wish they just kind of were just like, this is a new show now. Like, you don't have to worry about, like, the movie's the movie if you want to watch it, and this is a show. But, I mean, it is what it is. So, this is where we meet Jane, or who will be called Jane. She's in this building. She goes into a room. There is a screen in this room, and, you know, it's like, hi, welcome. Insert your nail clippings, which is like, what? And then it starts to ask her some basic questions about like what is your ethnicity, and just kind of like random like basic questions, almost like when you're filling out like a resume. While this interview is happening, it is overlapped with her checking out a house. She like hops out of a car. She's in New York. She's looking at this really nice house, just kind of checking it out. We learn that she has antisocial tendencies. As she goes in the house to like a different section or like a different room, we see someone else come in, and this is where we meet John. And he's going through the same process, you know, basic questions. How tall are you? What's your ethnicity? Again, he's also going through the house. And this is a dope, like, I don't even know what to call this house, like a condo or something like that. Like, you know, downstairs they have a full like wine rack and like full bar down there. There's an indoor pool underneath the house. Like, this is you'll never see this house in your lifetime type of house. But eventually they meet each other at the elevator. There's an elevator in this house. And we get the title screen, just a simple title screen of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And we are into the episode. Good luck on your first day of marriage. They have both signed up to be married to each other. They're complete strangers. They're looking around. There's guns behind the painting. He tries to make some conversation about explaining like a gun to her, and she's like, yeah, I know about the like special feature of that specific gun. So I was like, all right, cool. And so they're looking at their stuff. They got their first assignment. It is to follow a woman and intercept a package and drop it off at a specific location. This is where they get new identities, new cards, IDs, all that good stuff. It's like, oh, we're married. They got wedding rings. And just this whole exchange since they met is super awkward, which is very well done because, I can't even imagine being like, hey, your job is to be married to this complete stranger and you both gotta live in this house. So having the vibes already be like super just like, I don't want to be here. Like as a viewer, it's like, okay, cool, you guys are nailing it. There also is a cat and she's like, oh, I guess they just came with the house, which is like, that's weird and random. Okay. So they go to do their own thing. John is doing yoga. He's making food. He sees her dishes in the sink. He's like, okay, cool. She also made food. He can hear her watching TV. He goes to see her. He doesn't have a shirt on, right? It's nighttime. So she's like, yo, you lost your shirt? And he's like, and they have the awkward conversation about like, he's like, oh, I think you're overwatering your plant. Here, there's this app where you can let you know like how much water your plant needs and all that good stuff. And she's like, all right, cool. And he's like, I my shirt was off because it's hot downstairs, but I can tell you got the AC up here. So, it's kind of colder. So that's why, my shirt was like off. And she's like, all right, cool. So again, it's just more awkward conversation that just fits with the tone of just being thrown into a marriage essentially out of nowhere to a stranger. So she watches Naked and Afraid. He goes back to his room. He took a picture of her and it was like, all right, John, you're sending weird vibes. But he's like looking her up online, which is like, it's still weird that you did that. But I get like, if you're going to live with a stranger, you probably want to do some research if you can. We go into the next day. It is time for the mission. They go to a breakfast spot. They spot their target. They're going to be sat at the wrong spot. And they're like, actually, can we sit over there? So like, all right. They order some drinks. They're looking at the lady. She is looking up on her tablet, 10 places to travel alone. And then behind them, the waiter drops something. And they're both like ready. They almost like pull out their guns. It's like, okay, they're like a little bit on edge. They're ready for action. But they go back and they just kind of start talking while they're like, seeing what this lady's doing. It turns out they both applied for high risk, whatever that means. John is like, I expected more action. We're just kind of sitting here watching a lady. They both apparently got recruited through an email, which is interesting to this like espionage type thing. It's just like, oh, I got an email. They both, when they were doing the interview, I can talk. When they were doing the interview, they brought up being paired up at the last minute to both of them. So this is both kind of a brand new situation that they didn't know they were getting into until like literally the end of the interview. He starts to ask questions about her. She's not really, answering at all. They'll start talking about like, oh, have you killed anybody? Again, more awkward conversation. I forget how the conversation gets here, but basically, he's like, oh, he asked her, what's the last time you've been in New York? She's like, oh, yeah, I got pancakes with a pedophile. And he goes, what? And then, but the lady is on the move. Time to start moving. So they are trailing this lady. Well, actually, you know what? Before we even get to that part, so far I already like that, this isn't Mission Impossible. This isn't this high action. Even the fact that he has to bring it up like, hey, I signed up for like high risk and we're just kind of like sitting here staking out this lady. Again, I think adds to the awkwardness of being in this marriage, of being in this partnership, of like, hey, we're doing this job, we don't know each other, but we're trying to figure this thing out, but like nothing's really happening, which is why there's almost this need for conversation, because it's like, we're it's not like a gunfight, right? We're just kind of like chilling. So I guess we should get to know each other, especially if we're gonna be married. So I think it's all working for what is actually happening, and it's benefiting the characters too, because they're also like, oh, this isn't this big thing, right? This is a kind of small thing going on. But they continue to trail this lady. She meets up with a younger guy in the park. John's like, oh, it must be her son. Jane's like, maybe it's her boyfriend. And he's like, okay, whatever. So he starts to ask more questions about her. And again, she's distant. She's like, dude, I don't know you. Like, I'm not just going to give you my information. And he's like, okay, but if we're going to pretend to be married, like, I have to know some basics about you. So they start going over like, I like to cook, but I don't like to clean, or, stuff like that. Just like real mundane stuff. So they get some idea about each other. And Jane asks this in question of, what happens if we fail? And he's like, but we won't. And so I was like, okay, that's a little foreshadowing of something. So it turns out Jane was right. This is a sugar baby situation. So the lady gave the young man money and they started making out. And then the lady was off. And so they continued to follow her through the subway. She then goes into a building where a theater production is going on. John is not able to make it in, but Jane is able to get into the building. But before that, they have to exchange numbers. And again, this is where John is a little weird, where he like pushes her hair back to like put an earpiece in, but doesn't say anything. So she's like, whoa, dude, like this is just a mission. Like this ain't what you think it is. And he goes, oh, my bad, I was trying to put this earpiece in, I didn't say anything, that's on me. But the way he's saying it is almost like, I don't know, I guess like you took it the wrong way. And it's like, John, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, I'm gonna put this earpiece in, or like, hey, here's this earpiece, let me like, put it in for. It's like, clearly you're doing something, all right? You're not sneaky, my guy. But anyways, Jane makes it into the play. They begin to chat on the phone because she can hear him through the earpiece, but she has to text him because they're in the middle of the play. Small little nitpick, but I was like, Jane, your brightness is so high in this dark room. Like, turn that thing down, all right? I don't know if it's an iPhone thing or what. I was like, turn that brightness down. But they started talking about the pancake story because he really wants to know if she was like messing with him or not. Turns out that a 40-year-old man invited Jane and her friend to breakfast when they were 14. They went against their better judgment. They ate the pancakes and they left. And then when they left, they started laughing about it because it was such a crazy situation. While they were lost in this conversation in real time, Jane and John, the lady dips and Jane's like, oh, I gotta go follow her. Almost lose her, but they follow her into this almost like a mall type thing, like a strip mall almost. This is where the panic begins to set in for both of them, especially Jane. You can hear in her voice, the music starts to kick up. John has this idea of like, oh, I need to grab a box that's like the same box that she has. So he's trying to go anywhere through these stores to like grab a box, but Jane doesn't know that. So she's panicking. She's like, she's moving. What if she's calling somebody? What if she swaps the package? Like, what are you doing? And he's not communicating. He's just running around trying to get this box so he can, get it on time. Eventually, he grabs a box. At this point, they're both outside. John runs up to some guy and pretends to be mad at him. And then in the confusion, Jane bumps into the lady, swaps the box, and walks away. And they get away scot-free. And it's like, all right, you wanted high risk. The risk was high, right? Well, high enough. I like that we immediately cut to like right after they're back on the subway. So it's not like the next day. It is like, a couple minutes later. They're laughing about it. They're speculating about what's in the box. They're like, oh, it must be like high tech, like Intel, or you know what I'm saying? Just like something to really get something. We got to get off the streets. Something like that, like a big deal. John's like, why did you take this job? And Jane's like, well, no one else would hire me. And he's like, well, no one else would hire me either. So it's kind of like, oh, I wonder, what's up with both of them. There's a little bit of mystery there. But I mean, the whole thing is mystery, right? Like they don't know really who hired them or what their deal is or, it's just being thrown into this crazy job. As they're walking to deliver this package, we get a little more of their interviews, and it turns out that they agreed to no contact with anyone. John is like, well, you saying I can't talk to my mom? And Jane is like, oh, thank God. Like, you're paying me not to talk to my dad? Sounds like a relief. So clearly opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to their parents. They stop in front of a mansion. Well, it has to be like, this is just a huge house in this neighborhood. It's like a mansion basically. All right. They walk in, there's the guy just sitting there and they're like, yo, we got a package. And he's like, yo, there's someone here with a package. They walk back to meet a lady. She opens the box, pulls out this metal case. It's like, oh, high tech, like something's going on. Pulls out a cake. And she's like, all right, well, it's a little damaged, but I guess I'll talk to your higher ups about like, about the cost of everything. You guys are done. You can dip if you want. So they leave, and full on defeat, obviously, right? You take this high risk espionage job, and your first job is to deliver a cake. Jane is over there like, a cake? Like, seriously, a cake? And he just doesn't even want it. John's like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, let's just let it go. Like, right as they're about to walk away. And I was watching this being like, really, a cake? Like, there has to be more than that. Boom! The house explodes. And then, you get the high-pitched ringing. They're covered in, dust from the explosion. They start running. You know what I'm saying? They're running. Which I was like, why would you run? And I was like, also, you know what? I would run too, because I'm not going to stick around for questioning. And then just in general, even if I was a bystander, right? If something explodes, I'm not going to run towards it. I'm going to run away. Like, I got to get out of there. So I was like, all right, it's a good decision. They are actually being chased. Turns out everyone from the house didn't die. Some of those guys are still alive. So they're like chasing them. They run through a mechanic shop. The guy's like, yo, what are you doing here? So I have to run through there. Jane, because John cut his hand. Jane puts the blood all over her head. And next thing we know, he's like pushes into a kitchen. And she's like, oh my God, I need help, please. And they could like go help. And the two of them like go into the bathroom, clean up in there. They decide that they're gonna split up and then meet up back at the house. And before that, the two of them just laugh, and it's kind of like not even a funny laugh. It's just kind of like yo, that just happened type laugh. Like when you're so anxious or whatever, like you don't know what to do, so you just kind of laugh because you're nervous. But they split up. John takes the subway. Jane kind of cleans up and takes an Uber home. When she gets home, John is laying in her bed, again, being a little bit creepy. And he was like, oh, I was waiting for you. And then I just kind of got tired on his bed. She lays next to him. She says that, if we would have stayed there like a couple more seconds for that drink or whatever, like we would have died. And he's like, it's high risk. Like, that's what we signed up for. He's like, we should probably name your cat while it's here. And he starts going through names, and she keeps saying, like, no, it's Max. And he's like, okay, clearly this is your cat. And she's like, yeah, it's my cat. They kind of, set it up for the night. That's it. John goes back to his room. Before he leaves, Jane is like, Dina was the one who decided to go meet that guy like years ago for pancakes. She was like, I didn't want to do it. In fact, I was completely terrified. And he's like, oh, okay. We end on a note that is her in the interview. And she's like, oh, a whole new life? You know what? I'm okay with that. And that's where the episode ends. So if it is your first time here, I have a 3-point rating system. It is one and done, give it a chance, and I'm in. For this first episode, I would say give it a chance. I wanted to say I'm in, but I think just based on this first episode, there's enough interest because the show is slow, right? Again, this isn't Mission Possible. This is, we were trailing a lady. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what's going on? It isn't until the cake explodes in the last, 10 minutes that things really pick up. So because this isn't a full-on, action-packed, we're going to action, it's probably more of them just kind of getting to know each other and then going through a mission. I'm like, all right, that gives me enough interest that I want to watch another episode, but it isn't like I have to watch the next episode. You know what I mean? So for that, I can't give it an I'm in. I have to give it a chance for this first one. But I do, again, like the awkwardness of the two of them getting to know each other and just kind of being like, what is our mission? How are we going to get through it? And again, I like, even though this is slower, that it's not this big high octane show. It is, all right, we have a situation. How are we going to solve it? How are we going to do this when we don't really know each other or our styles yet? Because you got to assume they get to know each other more over the show. So yeah, I'm about to give this one give it a chance. Now, I did watch the entire season, so I am going to get into spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I thank you for your time. I will see you next week. I haven't picked the show yet, but I will be back on Tuesday. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Little Leafers, or you can just kind of wait until I upload the next episode. But if you're staying for spoilers, we are getting started in 3, 2. So the thing about the show for me is it's so awkward, and not even awkward in the first episode in a way, but there are so many times where they're especially in like the later episodes where they're just arguing, and it is just uncomfortable is the better word. And it's like, oh, I don't want to be here. Like, this isn't like, this isn't Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie where it's like hot, I'm saying, oh, they're gonna fight, they might kill each other. This is like marriage. This is like your parents fighting, right, on like a TV show, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be here right now. Like, where's the fun? Where's the espionage? So a lot of the episode was just kind of like that uncomfortable, like, I don't think I should be here type feeling. And honestly, it isn't until like the last episode that the show really hones in on the Mr. and Mrs. Smith aspect. I was talking to my friend about it, and I was like, I don't think the show needed to be called Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think from a business standpoint, it makes sense because you're going to draw people more in because they know the movies. But in terms of like the show itself, I feel like you could have called this something else. Like, you could have picked a last name and then put it for the show. For example, I'm going to be like the Johnsons, right? Like, you could have just called the show the Johnsons, and you still would have got the same idea across. It's just two people that are forced to be married and who are also spies. It isn't, again, until the last episode and the referential part in the first episode that really makes this feel like Mr. and Mrs. Smith for me. So again, yeah, I was like, I don't really get why this needs to be called this other than the fact of just getting more people in to like watch the show. But again, I watched it. It ended on that cliffhanger, which I like because you never know if you're going to get picked up for another season. So I like the open-endedness of it being like, you know what? If it never comes back, then they big dead. And if it does come back, then, we'll find out what happens. But, I think the slow burn of this show is kind of what makes it good. It is two people trying to like navigate a relationship that they're thrown into while also trying to juggle this job because they also work together. But then also it's like this high risk job where it's like we could die at any time, and then if we fail so many times, like, we're out. And then you get the aspects of like Jane being possibly promoted, and I thought she was going to be promoted, leave him, and then she's going to have to hunt him down, which I thought might have been a more interesting aspect of the show. But I'm not a writer. I think this show was solid. I would watch another season, but I'm not craving another season, if that makes sense. I kind of already lost my train of thought, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Again, I will be back next week. I haven't picked the next episode, but it will be on Tuesday. I already figured out the technical issue, so it's all good now. But yeah, that is the episode. So thank you. Peace.